The 2023 NBA trade deadline was one like no other. Pretty much every team made at least a move, and in total over 50 draft picks were traded, most of which being second rounders, which has sparked the collective question of what is the value of a second round pick? And I think the answer is not very much. Today I wanted to go through the entire league and offer my thoughts on their post-trade deadline outlook. Before we get started though, please like the video as it really does help me out much more than I think you guys realize. Now, let us get going, and we will be going in current standings order, east to west. So we will start with the upper tier in the east. I have the east broken into 4 tiers. In first place, the Boston Celtics gave up basically nothing in order to obtain Mike Muscala. This move came as a surprise to me and many other people. Muscala is one of those guys who pretty much every year I think could be moved to a contender, yet nobody ever seems to even notice he exists. I was hearing nothing about him being dealt prior to the deadline. That, in combination with how well the Thunder were playing, led me to believe Muscala was not going to be moved. Yet, he was, and I really like it. Muscala's bread and butter is floor spacing. He is a very tall and long three-point specialist, and as a veteran, he knows how to stay within himself. I've seen a lot of bad takes online, people saying he's going to fill in for the minutes that Luke Kornet is currently playing, but the reality is Muscala is not a center, he's not a rebounder, and he's not a rim protector. He is a floor spacing power forward. He's still going to be helpful, but he's not going to do what I think a lot of people think he's going to do. This is going to be a big help to the Celtics as they try to maintain their number 1 seed. In second, the Milwaukee Bucks cleared their bench, sending out Jordan Nwora, George Hill, and Serge Ibaka, along with multiple second-round picks to acquire Jay Crowder. On one hand, the Bucks gave up basically nothing, as none of the assets sent away apart from Nwora ever touched the court, and it wasn't like he was moving the needle anyway. But on the other hand, the Bucks are about to find out why 6 other contenders have given up on Crowder over the years, after highly seeking him out. Crowder is going to require a ramp-up period since he sat out the entire season demanding this trade. At the peak, I think he might put up 7 points a game while shooting league average and playing slightly above average on defense. This is not a big game changer for the Bucks. I think the Celtics did a much better job at the deadline. I think the Bucks might take the 1 seed, but it's not because of Crowder. In third, the Philadelphia 76ers got off Matisse Thybulle and acquired Jalen McDaniels. This is a very small improvement, but an improvement nonetheless. Thybulle was a great defensive player. McDaniels is a good defensive player. Thybulle was an atrocious offensive player. McDaniels is an okay offensive player. So as a whole, if you add those 2 things together, you will find they are slightly better now in this exact same role. So it's a net positive. But personally, I and many others thought Philly needed a little bit more pieces that aren't just a slight improvement to Thybulle. They could have used a backup center considering they don't play Paul Reed and Montrezl Harrell is not a positive on defense. And they could have used maybe a little more firepower on the wing. Not that McDaniels can't score, but I mean, they have Daniel House Jr., Georgie Niang, PJ Tucker, and Furkan Korkmaz. That's just not a very powerful lineup of scorers. All in all, though, the Sixers didn't get much better here, but nobody else in this upper tier of the East did, so it's not that big of a deal. In fourth place, the final team in the upper tier, the Cleveland Cavaliers, did absolutely nothing, and I'm perfectly okay with this. One of my scrap videos this past week, due to me being very sick, was all about every team's needs going into the deadline. The Cavs were one of like 3 teams that I thought were perfectly fine the way they were. They are young, hungry for success, and have plenty of veteran role players around the edges already. You cannot build a team much better than what they already have. The only thing they could possibly do is convince Kevin Love to accept a buyout so they can re-sign him for less money, and then use that money to go get something else that might help them out a little bit, but they don't really need that. I think the Cavaliers are a contender in the East. In the second tier of the East, I see teams that are fighting to make the 5 and 6 seed, aka barely get out of the play-in and make the playoffs. In fifth, the Brooklyn Nets had a very eventful deadline. They were finally able to rid themselves of the cancer that was Kyrie Irving. But in a shocking manner, they also sent off their best player, Kevin Durant. The KD thing is really what has shaken the world in Brooklyn, as there was briefly a world where he and the rest of his solid team were going to remain competitive in the East, but that is no more. Still though, I really do like the Brooklyn team, now more so than I did a week ago. Spencer Dinwiddie doesn't get much credit, but he puts up 17 and 5 a night shooting 40% from deep. That's really good. He is a far better positive influence on his team and way more available than Kyrie Irving. Then alongside him, you have guys like the emerging superstar Cam Thomas. He was at one point a forgettable second-year player, but he is now bursting onto the scene thanks to the opportunity that fell into his lap. Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson are monumental additions to this team at the forward spots. Both guys can shoot over 40% from deep, create shots for themselves and a little bit for others, and they are elite defensive players. Dorian Finney-Smith is a terrific defensive upgrade around the perimeter, plus they still have all their shooters, Seth Curry, Yuta Watanabe, and Joe Harris. Plus they still have Nick Claxton. Tell me how this team is not supposed to be considered a top 6 team. Really, they are stacked with really good players, even some borderline all-stars and all-defensive first-team candidates. Of course, Ben Simmons is still there, which is a major hurt to the team, but they made that bet a while ago, so they're going to have to continue laying in it. Brooklyn is a good team, and they are my pick to retain the 5 seed in the East throughout the rest of the season. In 6th, the Miami Heat, like Cleveland, did nothing apart from essentially cutting Dwayne Dedmon. This really surprised me. The Heat are always contending for a finals run every year, but this year the roster has been very lackluster. Beyond their big 3 of Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and Tyler Hero, who have all been terrific, the team really falls off a cliff talent-wise. They had gone as far as sending Kyle Lowry home, and he didn't even attend their most recent game because they were looking for a trade for him. And then they didn't get one. So they really blew it. There's no sugarcoating it. They played it too safe. They didn't make a shape up to their core, and because of that, nothing has changed. They are not a contender right now, and teams around them got better. Now they need to scour the free agent market for a replacement point guard, assuming they're going to get rid of Kyle Lowry in the buyout way, which, what are you going to get, Reggie Jackson or Russell Westbrook? That's not an upgrade at all. You might as well just keep Lowry. The Heat's best bet is to finish 5th in the East. At worst, I think they'll fall to 8th. In my opinion, they're trending down. Currently in 7th, the Atlanta Hawks made a couple small moves, acquiring Saddiq Bey, Bruno Fernando, and Garrison Matthews, while losing Justin Holiday, Frank Kaminsky, and some picks. Bey is a better player than either of the 2 they lost, but he has never played for a winning team, so it is hard to say how well he will fare being the 9th or 10th man in the shot attempt chart. Defensively, he has the tools to be better than he is, and maybe things will start to click in Atlanta, but I'm really not sure. Fernando is a solid 3rd option center. He's at least better defensively than Frank Kaminsky, but he's really not an offensive player. And Matthews is a very aggressive and capable floor spacer, but not a whole lot else. What I will say here is that the Hawks had better options available. Everyone knows they could have traded John Collins. That's not a secret. They've been talking about doing that for years. I think they should have tried to move Trae Young because they have DeJounte Murray. They don't really need Trae Young. He's not playing well. Sell him while he's high, bringing in someone like OG Anunoby, Gary Trent Jr., and a bunch of picks, and then maybe do something with those picks, and bam, you have a super team in Atlanta. That's not what they chose to do. I think the Hawks are in a better position than the Heat to climb out of the play-in, but they are not alone in the chase of the Heat for one of those 2 spots. In 8th, the New York Knicks somehow managed to exchange Cam Reddish and Svi Mykhailiuk for Josh Hart. Yes, you heard that correctly. 2 benchwarmers who are not so young for a win-now wing who has shown the ability to not only space the floor, but he also creates very well for others, and he can defend multiple positions. This was a major win for New York. I am shocked the win-now Trailblazers thought this was a good idea, but it goes to show no matter how thoroughly you think you have thought through every trade idea, the people who actually pull the trigger and make the trades sometimes just pull stuff out of a hat. Now, I'm not saying the Knicks are perfect. They definitely are not. They still have some deadweight contracts that are kind of dragging them down. Derrick Rose and Evan Fournier are the most shining examples of this. But regardless, the Knicks did get better. I am going to predict that they'd steal the 6th seed. In the third tier of the East, we find 5 teams fighting for 2 of the lesser play-in spots. Currently in 9th, Chicago Bulls did absolutely nothing. This one really hurts Chicago fans, as it is evidence the team's ownership is content being mediocre and not spending money. Apart from Lonzo Ball, who is injured, this team has been as good as you could have expected. Their big-name guys are all playing well. DeMar DeRozan made the All-Star team again. Their other guys, Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic, they've been better, but they're still pretty good. Their role players, Alex Caruso, Patrick Baldwin, Goran Dragic, Andre Drummond, the list goes on, Ayo Dosunmu, they all played really well this year. But the team is still not very good. Management looked at this roster, an under 500 team, 3/4 of the way through the season, and decided to stay pat. It just doesn't make any sense. The Bulls may finish 9th or 10th and make the play-in, but that's a major failure considering what they were trying to achieve going into the season. In 10th, the Washington Wizards made one solid deal a little over a week ago. They took Rui Hachimura, a player who just didn't fit their team really, and turned him into Kendrick Nunn, a point guard who really isn't much, but at least is a player in a position of need. The Wizards' biggest problem all year long has been their lack of a starting point guard. This doesn't really fix this issue, but it is better than a logjam at the power forward spot. And I hear people being critical of them for giving Rui away for what people say is nothing, but 3 second-round picks and a player I don't consider nothing. Rui isn't a great player. He's not that young. His ceiling is not that high. He isn't nimble enough to play the 3. He isn't big enough to play the 5, and he only shoots okay, but at a very low volume. I don't mean to be harsh on him, but I think people have hyped him up a bit too much since he's a Laker now. The fact that they managed to get what they did for him was exceptional, but this is a very small victory for a rather pathetic team. They have 3 guys who are borderline all-stars, at least when they're on, and they're trying to make the play-in. Still though, I think Washington making the play-in is a success, whereas Chicago making the play-in is a major failure. In 11th and hungry to compete, the Toronto Raptors made a single win-now move. As I had predicted in a video I made 2 weeks ago, Toronto wasn't about to give up on the season as they acquired Jakob Poeltl, a center who fills the team's biggest hole as a defensive anchor who they can rely on. But that's all they did. This is a team full of guys between 6'7" and 6'9" who are really, really good. Gary Trent Jr., Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby. Very redundant amount of players who do the same thing, and they just kept them all. Anunoby could have been traded for so much, and they just kept him. I'm sorry, Toronto fans, but they made a bad decision this deadline. At best, thanks to Jakob Poeltl's defense, they might squeeze into the play-in. But what kind of accomplishment is that? This is a team that wanted to compete for a championship. Why did they accept this as enough at this deadline? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. In 12th, the Indiana Pacers opted to hold on to what they have and bring in Jordan Nwora, which is a pretty nothing addition, as well as a few picks. Nwora is a fine player, again, but he's not a needle mover. The team has Tyrese Halliburton returning from his injury, so they are going to be better now. They kind of fell pretty steeply in the standings when he went out with his injury. And, Halliburton's good, and he brings out the best of Miles Turner, Benedict Mathurin, Chris Duarte, Buddy Hield. This Pacers team might squeeze back into the play-in, but they didn't have a very good trade deadline. They definitely could have done something to make their roster a little more competitive, but it's not horrible. In 13th, the Orlando Magic made a couple small subtractions to their roster. Mo Bamba, who never really fit into their core, has been sent away for draft picks. And they are buying out Patrick Beverley, who was just traded to him, as well as Terrence Ross, who's been on the team for quite some time. The Magic are very feisty, and I really do love watching them play, as they have definitely outperformed expectations this season. And guys, they only sit 3 games out of the 10 seed. They have no reason to lose. They're going to keep trying to win, and they might squeeze into the play-in and make a lot of teams have a pretty bad offseason. Chicago, Washington, Indiana, Toronto especially. Those are teams that should be playoff contenders, or at least make the playoffs, and Orlando might spoil that. Finally, we reach the 4th tier of the East. These are basically the dead last teams who have no shot at anything. Tied for 14th, the Detroit Pistons did the Golden State Warriors a favor by accepting James Wiseman for picks. Wiseman is a bust and has a hard time competing against G League talent. The Pistons already have Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart, and Marvin Bagley, all basically centers who are better than Wiseman. Wiseman makes a lot of money, and he's due to make a lot more money next year. So I don't know why they went and chased after this guy. They also kept Nerlens Noel, which was a bit odd. I don't know. They wanted picks, they want to be bad, and I guess they do accomplish that with this. So I can't be too upset. It just seems like an odd thing to acquire. James Wiseman. I would have wanted Moses Moody or Jonathan Kuminga, but whatever. And finally, tied for dead last, yet still rolling out the same starting lineup full of win-now veterans in their 30s, the Charlotte Hornets had an embarrassing trade deadline. Yet I feel like they don't even realize it. Gordon Hayward, Kelly Oubre, and Terry Rozier are all still there. And they're all still playing big minutes, and they're all still losing. I know Oubre's hurt, but he plays when he's healthy. The only guy they managed to move was their starting center. So keep this in mind. This is a win-now team. Their starting center, Mason Plumlee, was traded for a single second-round draft pick and some money, basically. They had to, and money as in they had to spend money. They got Reggie Jackson, and they're just going to buy him out. So all they did was spend a bunch of money and get a second-round pick. It's just a complete and utter failure. You really can't make this up. You realize Jay Crowder was worth 5 second-round picks, and he hasn't played at all this year, yet the Hornets starting center was worth a single second-round pick. The Hornets are playing horribly. They might luck out and get Victor Wembanyama to join LaMelo Ball and PJ Washington, the only two good things this team has going. I don't think Wembanyama should come here. If he wants to have a successful career, there are other tanking teams that he'd be better off going to. Okay, enough of the Eastern Conference. Let's talk about the Western Conference. And first, the Denver Nuggets, through a couple of moves, sent away Bones Highland in exchange for Thomas Bryant, essentially. This is a major success for the Nuggets. I said in my last video, or 2 videos ago, the Nuggets' only issue was the fact that DeAndre Jordan was their backup center. Bones Highland has shown flashes that he can be a good to great scorer, but at the end of the day, he's a young shot creator who doesn't play good defense and apparently has been an issue in the locker room with both his teammates and his coaches. The title contending Nuggets don't have time for that. Thomas Bryant is a very good 5. He rebounds the ball well and he spaces the floor. I think he's a terrific addition to Denver and he's going to help them be even better than they already are. In second, the Memphis Grizzlies managed to send away Danny Green and picks to land Luke Kennard, if you can believe that. This is a steal. Kennard was lost in the shuffle in LA somehow, but know that he is one of the league's best shooters. On 3 tries a night, he shoots 44% from 3. He will definitely be a huge help to this team with their floor spacing and explosive scoring. And I know Danny Green spent a long time with this team rehabbing his injury, and he recently made his comeback, but at the end of the day, he's just not it. Like, Luke Kennard is going to help this team better. The Grizzlies will most likely retain their 2 seed thanks to this addition. In third, the Sacramento Kings made a single, nothing move for Kessler Edwards for cash. This was not a good deadline for Sacramento. They have sat on a good starting caliber center for the past year in Richaun Holmes, and once again have failed to liquidate him. Instead, the hot Kings will sit 4 centers on their bench behind all-star starter Domantas Sabonis. It does not make any sense. The lack of movement here proves the Kings are still the Kings. They got lucky drafting Halliburton, and even luckier being able to trade him for Sabonis and it working out so well. But that's it. They really do not put a team together very well. Yes, I know Kevin Huerter's good. That's okay. Now we're at the point where I can say that's it. In fourth, the Dallas Mavericks made a blockbuster trade to land Kyrie Irving in exchange for Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, and some picks. Good luck to Dallas. Kyrie has burned more bridges than most players ever will, not just with teams, not just with coaches, not just with general managers, not just with owners, not just with shoe companies, not just with fans. He's burned a lot of bridges, okay? It goes on and on and on. Yet, if you ask him, it is everyone else's fault for not appreciating him, or not celebrating him as he says it. But look, Kyrie is a very good basketball player. Therefore, Dallas will be a very good basketball team. But I don't have the Mavericks as a contending team. Luka and Kyrie are going to play very well with one another. They're going to win a lot of games. They will probably get past the first round of the playoffs, but we're not predicting playoff stuff right now. We're just predicting the season. But at the end of the day, they're not going to achieve a championship, which again, I know I just said, but I'm still talking about it. Kyrie's going to leave the team, and the Mavericks are going to be hung out to dry, and it's going to suck. It's going to suck a lot, but that's what they wanted to do. Good luck, Mavericks. In fifth, the Phoenix Suns made a groundbreaking, league-shaking, earth-quaking move by sending Dario Saric to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Darius Bazley. Bazley brings athleticism to a team that desperately needs it. This, combined with his soft shooting touch and defensive ability, will help the Suns compete. Oh, and they landed Kevin Durant, an MVP candidate who may average an efficient 30 points per game. The combination of Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Ayton may be the best four-man lineup in the entire league. Those four, if you want to add it all up, are responsible for 88 points per game while shooting 37% from deep and in the high 50% from two. Once Kevin Durant returns from his injury, they're gonna be unstoppable. But we are already 60-ish games into the season. The Suns are 8 games out of first. They do not have time to claim the top seed in the West, but they are my favorite to win the Western Conference and the championships as a whole. Again, we're not predicting that right now. I don't know why I'm saying it. Also, I didn't mention it, but TJ Warren is making his triumphant return to the Valley, which is a great thing to see for us longtime Suns fans. I predict the Suns will climb all the way to the 3rd and potentially the 2nd seed, but they're not catching the Nuggets. In 6th, the LA Clippers fixed this team's biggest weakness by bringing in Mason Plumlee to be their backup 5. That's a huge addition. This is a role that was completely vacant, so it's great that they were able to get this done, but unfortunately, they just replaced a problem with another problem. Now they don't have a point guard. Both of their point guards were Reggie Jackson and John Wall, and they were not playing very well. They were not elevating the team at all. They dropped both of them to bring in Bones Highland, who isn't much of a point guard. He's more of a shooter. The Clippers have plenty of forwards that they could have traded. Plenty of guys who can average an efficient 10 points a game for another contending team. But they just got rid of 2 guards, which it didn't make a lot of sense to me. They also got rid of Luke Kennard for Eric Gordon, and Kennard's a better shooter than Gordon, and he's a lot younger, so it's just another example of something that just doesn't make sense to me. I think the Clippers are a good team, but they're not going to catch Phoenix, Dallas, Memphis, or Denver, which could be a problem. In 7th, the Golden State Warriors have finally accepted that they made a horrible decision 2.5 years ago by passing on LaMelo Ball, and they finally sent James Wiseman away for the right to keep Gary Payton, a guy they could have just re-signed and spent less money on this past summer. This is a pretty embarrassing situation for the Warriors, but at least they are punting and acknowledging the fact they made a mistake rather than trying to make it work for longer and having it get worse. Payton was a valuable role player to this team last year, but unfortunately, I'm throwing a monkey wrench in there. Payton failed his physical due to an abdominal injury that is going to require several months to recover from, meaning he's likely to not play again this season. So now the Warriors have a question. Do they take Payton anyways and just sit him on the bench, or do they void the entire trade, keep Wiseman, and sit him on the bench? I don't know what they're going to do. If you ask me, I think they should just take Payton. That way they can at least have him for next year. But who the heck knows what they're going to do. The Warriors did not have a good trade deadline. And remember, they could have had LaMelo Ball, but they didn't. In 8th, the New Orleans Pelicans exchanged Devontae Graham and 4 picks for Josh Richardson. That's a lot. This is a big price to pay for a marginal improvement at the backup point guard spot. Richardson is a better defensive player than Graham, and that's about it. New Orleans chose essentially to rely on Zion Williamson to return from his injury, and hopefully that fixes the team because they've been absolutely terrible without him. In the 20 games he's missed most recently, they've won 6 and lost 14. They might be fine when he comes back, but they've fallen a lot, and now the path to success is a little bit tougher. In 9th, I think we're entering, by the way, the second tier of the West. The Minnesota Timberwolves made a big move by sending away their starting point guard D'Angelo Russell for Mike Conley, Nikhil Walker-Alexander, and some picks. Conley has a history of playing alongside Rudy Gobert, so he may be able to bring out the best in him. But who are we kidding, Minnesota? The correct trade here would have been to sell high on Karl Anthony Towns. Gobert, unfortunately, is not going to be going anywhere anytime soon. And he is a good center. He and Conley will help this team thrive. They are going to make each other better. And the franchise has made it very well known that they want Anthony Edwards to be the focal point going forward. Towns does not fit well alongside Gobert. Why sit on the asset? You could have gotten so much for Towns. You potentially could have traded Towns for Trae Young or OG Anunoby, Trent, and some picks. Like, there was a lot of things that could have been done with Towns. Maybe even Brooklyn would have taken Towns. You guys could have got Kevin Durant. I don't know. But they didn't do that. They made a marginal trade that helped other teams get better. And it doesn't make any sense to me. This is a bad team. They are trying to win and they are not making good decisions. I just don't understand. In 10th, the Utah Jazz once again sent away a handful of talented players in Mike Conley, Malik Beasley, and Jared Vanderbilt for Juan Toscano-Anderson and a single first-round pick, as well as the right to buy out Russell Westbrook's enormous contract. This doesn't make any sense to me either. Just like they did in the past offseason, where they got rid of their 3 best players, but kept a bunch of other guys, they've done that again. Not that these 3 are their best players, but these 3 are good players that at least Vanderbilt is worth a bit. And they got very little for him. I think Vanderbilt alone is worth a first-round pick minimum. Malik Beasley is worth something. Conley is a good point guard. He's a starting point guard for a team that's going to make the play-in. But all 3 of them, the sum was a single first-round pick and then the right to spend a bunch of money to get rid of Westbrook. I don't understand that. Why are they keeping Jordan Clarkson, Kelly Olynyk, and Rudy Gay? I get keeping Larry Markkinen and Colin Sexton, but I don't get this team's direction. Are they trying to make the play-in, or are they quietly trying to sabotage themselves and get the 11 seed so they can have a slightly better chance at drafting the first pick? It just doesn't make a lot of sense here. Jazz get a big fat L. In 11th, the Oklahoma City Thunder sent away Darius Bazley and Mike Muscala, and they acquired Dario Saric and some picks. The Thunder are not a bad team, but they made negligible moves here that are not going to lift the team any, nor are they going to drag the team down, because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is still playing like an MVP candidate, and a lot of these young guys are outperforming. Dario Saric does boost his team a little bit though. I think the Thunder are going to squeeze into the play-in, which is a big success for this team. In 12th, the Portland Trail Blazers have been sad. They are holding on to Damian Lillard for dear life, as well as Jeremy Grant and Jusuf Nurkic, and they're trying to be a playoff team. But they didn't make any moves during this trade deadline that make you think they're trying to be a playoff team, apart from not getting rid of their guys. Josh Hart and Gary Payton are gone. Not that Payton would have played, I get that, but still. They're essentially gotten rid of those 2 good players for a trial run of Cam Reddish, Kevin Knox, and Matisse Thybulle. Those are 3 not very young players who have failed to live up to expectations. Why would they do that? Why are the Blazers doing that? Why do they have Lillard and Grant and Nurkic? Why are they still playing to win games, but they're taking flyers on guys who are pretty much 1 foot out of the league? I don't understand that. Maybe I'm being a little harsh calling them 1 foot out of the league. I get they have value, but they're not guys who are going to lift a playoff team. The Blazers are confusing me right now. They did not have a good trade deadline. In 13th, the saddest contender in the West, LA Lakers, made some major moves. But is it too little too late? That's the question. Alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis, as well as Dennis Schroeder, I think he's a good player that doesn't get enough credit, and Austin Reeves, they have added Rui Hachimura, D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, and Mo Bamba. And all they lost was Thomas Bryant, Kendrick Nunn, Patrick Beverley, and of course the miracle in the room, Russell Westbrook is finally gone. It is shocking to me that the other team agreed to these terms, but this haul is absolutely terrific. The Lakers went from being the laughingstock of the league to legitimate contenders here in the final 20-ish game stretch. As it stands today, I predict the Lakers, who currently sit 2.5 games behind 10th, will surpass the Blazers and the Jazz at the very least, meaning they will be competing with the Thunder, Wolves, Pelicans, and Warriors for those 4 play-in spots. But that's as far as I think they're going to be able to climb because they just waited too long to make this trade. Of course, I know the other teams were not willing to make the trades until this point because of the deadline, and it's a little unfortunate because the Lakers are wasting LeBron James' potentially last great year. We have no idea how long this will keep going. But I'm happy for the Lakers at least making a win-now move that makes a little bit of sense finally. In 14th, the San Antonio Spurs sent off Jakob Poeltl and Josh Richardson for a handful of picks and the right to buy out Devontae Graham and Dwayne Dedmon. This is pretty much what I expected. The Spurs are not a good team, but they do have a really good young core of players, and they have good coaching, and they have a good culture. Like, this is a team that's going to end up being pretty good. I'm a bit surprised they didn't get anything for Doug McDermott. I feel like someone would have given him a second-round pick for him, but nothing materialized. I think the Spurs did fine considering they're trying to lose. And in 15th, the Houston Rockets were able to get off of Eric Gordon, Garrison Matthews, and Bruno Fernando, which 3 guys who really aren't in their future, for a lot of picks, although they do have to buy out a few guys, including John Wall, which is kind of funny. If you look at the Spurs and Rockets, I think the Spurs have a brighter future, but they're both doing the same thing, and they're both doing perfectly good at it. So there you have it, my take on every team in the entire league and where they're headed in this final 20-ish games of the season after the trade deadline. Thank you guys for watching. Please let me know what you think of my predictions, what you think of my takes. Where did I go wrong? Who did I underrate? Who did I overrate? What am I missing? Did I miss something important? Let me know in the comments. Like the video if you have not already. Subscribe if you want to watch more basketball content on this channel, and I will see you all next time.